I never thought my life would take such a turn. Back then, I was just a simple woman, living quietly in a small house at the edge of town. My days were slow, my nights were calm. I had worked hard all my life, raised my daughter the best I could, and I thought the hardest chapters of my life were already behind me. But I was wrong. Life had one more test waiting for me, one that would define the rest of my years. It was an ordinary afternoon when everything changed. I remember the knock on the door, sharp and hurried. My daughter stood there, her face pale, her eyes restless. Behind her were 3 little faces, my grandchildren. Their eyes carried confusion, innocence, and a quiet fear. My daughter didn't ask, she demanded. She said she needed me to keep the kids just for a while. She told me it would only be a few days, maybe a week. She had some things to sort out. I wanted to ask questions. Where was she going? Why couldn't the children stay with her? But her voice was sharp, her tone final. She shoved a small bag into my hands, kissed her children quickly, and before I could process what was happening, she was gone. I stood there, frozen, holding 3 pairs of little hands. I could hear the youngest one sniffle, trying to hold back tears. The eldest tried to be brave, forcing a smile that didn't last more than a second before it melted into fear. My heart sank. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. That night was the longest night of my life. I tucked them into bed, 3 children who didn't understand why their mother had left. They asked me questions I couldn't answer. When is Mommy coming back? Why did she leave us here? Did we do something wrong? Their little voices cracked my heart open. I whispered promises I wasn't sure I could keep. I told them their mother would be back soon. I told them everything would be okay. But inside, I was terrified. I wasn't young anymore. My body ached. My strength wasn't what it used to be. Raising 3 children wasn't something I had planned for, not at this stage of my life. How would I feed them? How would I clothe them? How would I give them the love and guidance they deserved when I felt so empty inside? That first week I lived in constant fear. Fear that my daughter wouldn't come back. Fear that I wasn't strong enough to take care of them. Fear that one day these children would grow up and hate me for the choices I made. I barely slept. I barely ate. My days were filled with cooking, cleaning, washing clothes, drying tears, and trying to smile when I felt like breaking down. But the hardest part wasn't the physical work. It was the silence from my daughter. No calls, no letters, no sign of her. The days stretched into weeks, and the weeks began to bleed into months. Every time the children asked about her, I would give them the same answer. Soon. She'll be back soon. But deep down, a voice inside me whispered the truth. I was alone in this, and yet, in that storm of fear and uncertainty, something unexpected began to happen. I started to feel a bond with those children that was deeper than anything I had imagined. The way the youngest wrapped her tiny arms around me when she was scared. The way the middle child would help me in the kitchen, standing on a stool just to stir a pot of soup. The way the eldest tried to be strong for the others, reminding me so much of myself when I was younger. They didn't just need me. I realized I needed them too. Still, every night when I looked out the window, I prayed I would see my daughter walking back up that path. I prayed she would take responsibility, that she would explain, that she would make things right. But she never came. And so, the weight of responsibility grew heavier on my shoulders. I didn't complain to anyone. I didn't ask for help. I told myself, these are my blood, my family. I cannot abandon them the way she did. People around me started to whisper. Neighbors gossiped about how my daughter had left her kids, about how that poor old woman was now raising 3 mouths she hadn't planned for. Some pitied me, some judged me, but none of them knew the truth of what I was going through. None of them understood the fear that lived inside me every day, the fear that one mistake, one failure, could destroy these children's futures. That was the beginning. The day my daughter left wasn't just the day she abandoned her kids. It was the day my life took a turn I could never have prepared for. A turn that would demand every ounce of strength, patience, and love I had left. And as I stood in the kitchen late at night, watching those children sleep on the worn-out couch, a thought burned in my mind. Maybe this isn't temporary. Maybe she isn't coming back at all. I didn't know it then, but that night marked the start of a journey that would span years. Years of sacrifice, years of struggle, years of love. and years of waiting for a daughter who had vanished from our lives. The first few weeks were the hardest. I was no stranger to raising children. I had raised my own daughter, but doing it all over again at my age felt like climbing a mountain with no end in sight. Every morning began before the sun rose, and every night stretched far past my own exhaustion. I had to relearn everything. Packing school lunches, waking them up for school, checking homework, cooking meals that 3 different appetites would accept. It was like starting motherhood all over again. But this time my bones were weaker, my energy was shorter, and my resources almost empty. Money became a constant worry. I had lived a modest life with just enough for myself. But children needed more: shoes that fit, clothes that grew with them, books, food, medicine. I stretched every coin until it screamed. Sometimes I went without so they could have a little more: a new pencil, a carton of milk, a second-hand coat. These little things became battles I fought silently every day. The nights were even harder. The children cried often in their sleep, calling out for their mother. I would sit on the edge of their bed, stroking their hair, whispering that everything would be okay, even when I wasn't sure it would be. Some nights I cried with them, hiding my face in the dark so they wouldn't see my weakness. But slowly, we began to find a rhythm. A fragile routine that stitched our broken days together. The youngest started clinging to me like a shadow, never letting me out of sight. The middle one, full of questions, demanded answers I didn't have. And the eldest, oh, how my heart ached for him. He tried to grow up too fast. He helped me with the younger ones, setting the table, watching over them when I ran errands. He carried a weight no child should ever have to carry. And then something happened that shook me to my core. One afternoon, while I was cooking, the youngest tugged on my dress and said, "Mommy, I'm hungry." For a second I froze. Mommy. She had called me Mommy. The word burned and healed me at the same time. Part of me felt joy. Maybe I was giving her enough love to fill the gap. But another part of me ached because she was forgetting her real mother. It wasn't just her. Slowly, all 3 began to see me not just as grandma, but as the center of their world. They ran to me when they were scared. They leaned on me when they were happy. They brought me drawings from school with my name scrawled in bright colors. I was no longer just their grandmother. I was their everything. Still, not everyone around us was kind. Neighbors began to gossip. Some pitied me. Poor woman, raising kids at her age. Others criticized me. Her daughter must have left because of how she raised her. Their words stung, but I kept my head down. I didn't raise these children for the approval of others. I raised them because I couldn't let them fall into the world alone. There were small victories, too. I still remember the first time I managed to cook a proper meal after weeks of cheap, hurried food. The children devoured it like they hadn't eaten in days, and the youngest hugged me so tight afterward that I nearly cried at the table. Or the time the eldest brought home a drawing of our family, not 4, but just the 4 of us, me and the 3 kids, standing together under the sun. He didn't draw his mother at all. That picture broke me and healed me all at once. But beneath those small joys was a constant ache. Every night before I went to bed, I sat alone, staring at the door, wondering if she would ever come back. Wondering what kind of mother could leave her children behind like forgotten luggage. And every morning I forced myself to smile for the kids, to show them strength even when I was crumbling inside. Over time, I realized something important. This wasn't temporary anymore. My daughter's silence grew longer, her absence louder. The days stretched into months, and with each passing season, I understood the truth. She wasn't coming back, so I adjusted. I became their parent in every sense of the word. I learned to juggle my small income, to stretch every resource, to hide my own pain behind a smile. I gave up the quiet life I had once dreamed of. There would be no retirement, no peaceful evenings, no time to rest. My life belonged to them now. I won't lie, it was exhausting. There were days when I wanted to give up, when the weight was too heavy, when I felt like my body couldn't take another sleepless night. But then, one of them would crawl into my lap, or draw me a picture, or whisper, "I love you," before bed, and suddenly, my strength would return. I told myself over and over, they didn't choose this. They didn't ask for this. They are innocent. And if their mother won't fight for them, then I will. And so the years began to pass. Slowly, painfully, but with moments of joy hidden in the cracks. What started as fear became habit, and what began as obligation grew into the deepest love I had ever known. 13 years. When I say it now, it feels like a lifetime. And in many ways it was. What began as a desperate attempt to hold things together turned into the very fabric of my existence. Those children grew up before my eyes, and with every passing year I grew older, weaker, but somehow stronger at the same time. The early years were the hardest, but they were also filled with moments that I'll never forget. I was there for the youngest's first day of school. She clutched my hand so tightly, tears streaming down her face, begging me not to leave her. My heart broke, but I smiled and whispered, "You're brave, sweetheart. You'll be okay." When she finally stepped into that classroom, I stood outside the door, listening to her cries, holding back my own. I was there for the middle one's first fever that spiked in the middle of the night. I sat by his bedside with a wet cloth, praying he would pull through. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just watched his tiny chest rise and fall, terrified of losing him. When he finally opened his eyes and whispered, "Grandma," I thanked God for giving me another day with him. And the eldest? Oh, he carried so much weight on those young shoulders. He pretended to be strong, but I could see the pain in his eyes whenever he heard another child talk about their parents. He never said it out loud, but I knew he missed her. He missed the mother who should have been there for birthdays, for school events, for bedtime stories. I did everything I could to fill that hole, but I knew there were some things I simply couldn't replace. There were birthdays where we had nothing but a simple cake I managed to bake with scraps from the kitchen, yet they blew out their candles with laughter and smiles. There were Christmases when I couldn't afford gifts, so I wrapped up secondhand toys or knitted scarves, and their eyes still lit up with joy. To them, it wasn't about what we had, it was about being together. And to me, those moments were worth more than gold. But the sacrifices, the sacrifices were endless. I gave up everything for them. My own health began to falter. Aching knees, failing eyesight, constant exhaustion. There were days when my body screamed at me to rest, but how could I? The children needed food, they needed clean clothes, they needed a mother figure who never gave up on them. I skipped meals so they could eat. I wore the same worn dress for years so they could have uniforms for school. I gave up any dream of rest, of travel, of peace. My neighbors watched. Some admired me, others pitied me. They said things like, she should be enjoying her old age, not chasing after school buses. But I ignored them. I didn't care about rest. I didn't care about gossip. I cared only about those children, and they gave back to me in ways they didn't even realize. Their laughter filled the house, chasing away the silence that had once haunted me. Their hugs reminded me that I wasn't alone. Their achievements, no matter how small, were like trophies to me. When the middle child proudly showed me a drawing of our family, with me at the center, tears welled in my eyes. When the youngest whispered, "You're the best mom ever," I nearly broke down. They didn't know it, but those words gave me the strength to keep going. Still, there were hard moments too. Teenagers don't stay little forever, and as they grew, so did the challenges. Arguments over school, curfews, and responsibilities sometimes left me feeling helpless. There were times when the eldest slammed the door in frustration. Times when the middle one refused to listen. Times when the youngest cried because she wanted things I couldn't afford. I worried constantly. Was I doing enough? Was I giving them the future they deserved? But even in those storms, I never forgot why I kept fighting. Every night when they were asleep, I would sit alone in the quiet house and remind myself, they didn't choose this. They didn't deserve this. But they are my blood, my heart, my everything. 13 years passed like that. 13 years of scraped knees, school plays, doctor visits, late-night talks, tears, laughter, and everything in between. I grew old raising them, but they grew strong under my care. I was their parent, their protector, their guide. And for a long time, I believed this was how it would always be. I thought my daughter had vanished forever. I thought she had chosen her own life, leaving her children behind without a second thought. Part of me hated her for it, but another part of me prayed she was safe, wherever she was. And yet, even after all that time, a piece of me still hoped. Every birthday, every holiday, every milestone, I wondered if she would walk through the door. I wondered if she would suddenly appear and say, "I'm back." But she never did. So I built a new life for us. A fragile but happy life. I convinced myself that the past was behind us, that the future belonged to me and these children. I told myself we were finally safe, finally whole. I thought I had given them everything they needed. I thought I had finally built a world that no one could shatter. But I was wrong. It was an ordinary evening. One of those quiet nights when the children, no, not children anymore, teenagers, were scattered around the house. The eldest sat at the table, scribbling notes for school. The middle one was in his room, music playing faintly behind the door. The youngest was curled up beside me on the couch, her head resting on my shoulder as we watched an old movie together. I remember thinking how far we had come. 13 years. 13 years of struggle, sacrifice, and love. I thought the storm had passed. I thought the worst was behind us. But I didn't know that everything was about to change in a single moment. The knock on the door was soft at first, then louder. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, my breath caught in my throat. There she was, my daughter, the woman who had left 3 children on my doorstep over a decade ago. At first, I couldn't move. My heart stopped. My hands trembled. She looked different, older, thinner, her face worn with lines I didn't remember. Her eyes had shadows in them, heavy and restless. For a second, I thought I was imagining it. But no, it was her. My daughter, behind me, the youngest, sat up, her eyes wide with confusion. The middle one peeked out of his room, frozen in place. And the eldest, he just stood there staring at her as though a ghost had walked into our home. "Mom?" the youngest whispered, her voice fragile. The woman at the door smiled weakly, tears filling her eyes. She opened her arms, but no one ran to her. The silence in that room was deafening. I wanted to speak, but words failed me. My mind was a storm. Anger, relief, fear, hope. For 13 years I had wondered if she was alive, if she was safe, if she ever thought of us. And now here she was, standing in front of me as though nothing had happened. She stepped inside, her eyes darting from one child to another. "You've all grown so much," she whispered. Her voice cracked, but it didn't carry the warmth of a mother's return. It felt hollow, uncertain. The children didn't know how to react. The youngest clung to my arm, hiding behind me. The middle one crossed his arms, suspicion etched across his face. And the eldest, he stayed still, his jaw tight, his eyes unreadable. My daughter looked at me then, her face a mix of guilt and something else I couldn't quite place. "Mom," she said, "I'm back. I want my kids." Her words hit me like a knife. My kids. For 13 years they had been mine. 13 years of scraped knees, tears, birthdays, and sleepless nights. 13 years of sacrifice, love, and pain. And now she stood here, claiming them as though she had never left. I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers. Where were you? Why did you leave? Do you know what I went through? Do you know what they went through? But I swallowed my words, my chest heavy with disbelief. The children, though, spoke louder than I ever could. "Why did you leave us?" the middle one asked, his voice sharp. "You missed everything," the eldest added, his tone cold. The youngest said nothing. She only buried her face into my side, refusing to look at the woman who had given birth to her. My daughter's eyes filled with tears, but there was something unsettling in her expression. It wasn't just regret, it was determination. She wasn't here to explain. She wasn't here to apologize. She was here to take. That night was chaos. She stayed for hours, trying to talk, trying to reach them, but the children were distant, guarded. The eldest finally told her, "You can't just show up after 13 years and expect us to forget everything." His voice cracked, but his eyes held firm. I wanted to protect them from the confusion, the anger, the flood of emotions that her return had unleashed. But deep down, a fear grew inside me. Something about her presence didn't feel right. Her timing, her words, her sudden appearance after all these years, it all felt wrong. When she finally left that night, I sat in silence, my hands shaking. The children asked me what was going to happen. I had no answers. All I could do was hold them close and tell them I would never let anything tear us apart. But inside, I knew the truth. Her return wasn't a blessing. It wasn't a miracle. It was the beginning of my nightmare. At first, I tried to believe she had come back with good intentions. A part of me still wanted to think of her as the little girl I once raised, the daughter I once loved. Maybe she had struggled. Maybe she had been lost and finally found her way home. I told myself she deserved a chance to reconnect with the children, but it didn't take long for her true colors to show. Days after her sudden return, she came knocking again. This time her tone was sharper, her words colder. She didn't ask how the kids were doing. She didn't ask about their lives, their struggles, their triumphs. Instead, she said, "They're mine. You kept them from me." The room went silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Kept them from you?" I repeated, disbelief flooding my chest. "You left them on my doorstep and never looked back. 13 years, not a word, not a letter, not a visit. And now you say I kept them from you?" She folded her arms, her chin lifted with defiance. "I trusted you to watch them temporarily. I never said you could replace me. You brainwashed them. You turned them against me." Those words cut deeper than any knife. Brainwashed? As if the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the love I poured into every moment of their lives meant nothing. As if the bond we had built was a lie. The children were in the next room, but I knew they could hear every word. The youngest peeked from behind the door, confusion clouding her eyes. The middle one clenched his fists, his face red with anger. And the eldest? He stood still, his jaw tight, his silence louder than any scream. I wanted to scream for them. To tell her that I had raised them, not because I wanted to steal them, but because she had abandoned them. But before I could speak, she said something that froze me to the core. "If you don't hand them back to me, I'll take legal action. I'll tell the authorities you kidnapped them." Kidnapped. The word echoed in my ears, pounding in my skull. My knees almost gave way. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Kidnapper? Me? The woman who had given everything, my youth, my health, my future, to keep these children safe? I looked at her in horror. "How dare you," I whispered. "How dare you walk back into their lives after 13 years and accuse me of stealing them? Do you know what you're saying?" But she didn't care. Her eyes were cold, her expression unshaken. "They are mine, and I will get them back." The neighbors started to notice her presence. Whispers filled the street. Some people said, maybe she's right. They're her kids after all. Others shook their heads in disgust, saying, that woman has no shame after all these years. I felt the sting of both, the judgment, the doubt, the pity. Inside the house, the children clung tighter to me. "Grandma, don't let her take us," the youngest cried one night, burying her face in my chest. "She left us. She doesn't deserve us," the middle one spat, his voice shaking with anger. The eldest said little, but his eyes carried a storm I had never seen before. He was old enough to understand the danger, old enough to know that words like kidnapper carried weight in a world that often didn't care about the truth. I couldn't sleep. I lay awake every night, terrified of a knock at the door, terrified that someone would come and rip them away from me. My mind was haunted by the image of strangers taking them, while their mother stood behind, smiling with victory. I begged her to sit down, to talk, to think about what was best for the children. I told her they needed stability, they needed love, they needed safety, not chaos. But she wouldn't listen. To her, this wasn't about love anymore. It was about control, about power. The children began to sense the storm too. Their laughter grew quieter, their smiles rarer. The house that had once been filled with warmth now echoed with tension. They lived in fear that one day she would walk in and drag them away, and then the letter came. A notice from the court. My daughter had filed an official complaint. She was accusing me of kidnapping her own children. When I held that paper in my hands, the world spun. My vision blurred, my hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped it. After everything I had endured, after every sacrifice, after every sleepless night, I was being treated like a criminal. I wanted to collapse. I wanted to scream. But then I looked at the children, my children, though not by birth but by sacrifice, and I knew I couldn't give up. I couldn't let her win. I hugged them tightly that night, my voice steady even as my heart broke. "No matter what happens, I will fight for you. I will not let anyone tear us apart. But inside I was terrified. I had no money for lawyers, no strength for battles, no guarantee that the truth would matter in a system that often failed people like me. Still, I had one thing stronger than her lies. I had the love of those children. The day the letter arrived, my world shifted forever. Until then, the fight had been inside our home, whispers, accusations, tears. But now, it was official. My daughter had taken me to court. I stared at the papers for hours, my hands trembling so badly I could barely read the words. Custody dispute, accusation of unlawful retention, kidnapping allegations. Every word felt like a knife cutting into my chest. Me? A kidnapper? After 13 years of raising them, after every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every meal skipped so they could eat, now I was to be judged like a criminal. The children tried to reassure me. The eldest placed a steady hand on my shoulder. Grandma will tell them the truth. They can't take us away if we tell them. The middle one, fiery as ever, shouted, "Let her try! We'll never go with her." And the youngest simply cried, clutching my dress, begging me not to let anyone separate us. But I knew the truth. Courts didn't always care about love. They cared about papers, about rules, about blood, and she was their mother by law, even if she had abandoned them. The first court appearance was a nightmare. I walked into that cold, echoing room, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. My daughter was already there, dressed neatly, her hair combed, her face painted with the look of a grieving mother. She played her role perfectly, her tears, her shaking hands, her broken voice. She told the judge that she had left her children temporarily in my care. She claimed she had trusted me, only to have me turn against her and brainwash them. She said I had poisoned them against their real mother, that I had stolen 13 years of their lives. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell the world that she was lying. But when it was my turn to speak, my voice cracked, my words tangled. I wasn't a performer. I wasn't trained to twist the truth. I was just an old woman standing there, begging for the right to keep the children I had already raised. The judge listened carefully, but I could feel the weight of the system pressing against me. I had no fancy lawyer, no money to fight this battle properly. My daughter somehow had the resources. Someone was funding her, helping her, pushing her to do this. I didn't know who, but I could feel their presence behind her, like a shadow in the courtroom. The children were asked to speak. My heart broke as they stood before the judge, their small voices trembling but determined. "She left us," the eldest said firmly. "She didn't call, she didn't visit. Grandma raised us. She's our mom now. She's lying," the middle one cried, his fists clenched. "Grandma didn't steal us. Mom abandoned us. We don't want to go with her." The youngest, through tears, whispered the words that silenced the entire room. "Please don't make me go with her. Please don't take me away from Grandma." The courtroom grew still. Even the judge shifted uncomfortably. Their voices carried the truth I had been too broken to shout, but the battle didn't end there. My daughter's lawyer twisted everything, said children were easily influenced, that I had manipulated them, that I had fed them lies. They tried to paint me as a bitter old woman, clinging to children that weren't mine to keep. The community became divided. Some neighbors rallied behind me, calling me a hero, praising my sacrifice. Others whispered that maybe I had gone too far, that maybe I should let their real mother have them back. The judgment of strangers cut deep, but what hurt most was the betrayal of my own daughter. Nights became unbearable. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think of anything except the fear of losing them. I watched them while they slept, memorizing their faces, terrified that one day the court would rule against me, and those beds would be empty forever. I prayed like I had never prayed before. I asked God to see my heart, to protect the children, to let the truth shine through the lies. But still, the fear lingered. Every court hearing drained me. Every piece of paper, every legal word I didn't understand, every accusation thrown my way, it all chipped away at me. I felt myself getting weaker, my body failing under the pressure. But I couldn't show it. I couldn't let the children see me fall apart. They needed to believe I was strong enough to fight for them. I realized then that this wasn't just about custody. It was about proving my love, proving my worth, proving that motherhood isn't about blood, It's about sacrifice. But how do you prove love in a courtroom? How do you measure 13 years of bedtime stories, of patched-up clothes, of tears wiped away, of birthdays celebrated with pennies in your pocket? As I sat there one night, surrounded by piles of papers I didn't understand, I whispered to myself, I never imagined love would have to prove itself in court. If there was one thing I never wanted, it was for the children to be dragged into this battle. They had already endured enough in their young lives. But the court demanded to hear them, and I had no power to shield them. The morning of their testimony, I could barely look them in the eyes. I was terrified, not of what they would say, but of the pressure placed upon their fragile shoulders. They weren't supposed to defend me. They weren't supposed to fight battles that weren't theirs. But here they were, forced to stand in the middle of a storm created by the very woman who gave them life. The eldest was called First. At 16, he looked older than his years. The hardships we had faced had carved a quiet strength into him. He stood tall, his voice steady as he faced the judge. My mother left when I was 3 years old, he said, his eyes flicking toward her. I don't remember her saying goodbye. I only remember my grandma picking me up when I cried. She raised me. She made sure I went to school. She was there when I was sick. She is my mother. She's the only mother I know. His words were simple, but they carried the weight of 13 years. The courtroom fell silent. My daughter shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her face pale, her act beginning to crack. Next, the middle child stepped forward. He was fiery, passionate, his emotions always close to the surface. He clenched his fist so tightly his knuckles turned white. His voice shook with anger. She doesn't know us, he said, pointing at his mother. She wasn't there when I broke my arm. She wasn't there when I got bullied at school. She wasn't there for my birthdays, my holidays, my life. Grandma was. She stayed. She took care of us when no one else did. She didn't kidnap us. She saved us. Tears welled in his eyes, and he choked on his words, but his courage was undeniable. People in the courtroom murmured, moved by his honesty. Even the judge leaned back, thoughtful. Then came the youngest. Just 9 years old, she looked so small standing in that big, intimidating room. My heart ached as she held the stuffed toy I had given her years ago, clinging to it like a lifeline. Her voice was soft, trembling, but every word pierced like an arrow. I don't want to go with her, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. She left me when I was a baby. I don't remember her. I only know Grandma. Grandma sings me to sleep. Grandma makes me feel safe. Please, please don't take me away from her. The entire courtroom froze. Even those who had doubted me, even those who whispered against me, could not ignore the raw truth in a child's plea. I sat there, holding back sobs, every word etching itself into my soul. I wanted to run to them, to hug them, to tell them they were brave beyond measure, but all I could do was sit still, my hands clasped, praying the judge was listening, not just with ears, but with heart. My daughter's face hardened. She tried to keep up her act, but the children's testimony had pierced through her carefully crafted lies. Still, her lawyer twisted their words, saying I had manipulated them, filled their heads with hate, turned them against their real mother. But no amount of twisting could erase the tears on my granddaughter's face, the anger in my grandson's voice, the calm truth in the eldest's testimony. Their words were their own, their loyalty, their love. It was real. That night, when we returned home, the children gathered around me. Don't worry, Grandma, the eldest said quietly. We told them the truth. They have to see it now. The middle one sat by my side, his small hand gripping mine. We won't let her win. Even if they try to take us, we'll run back to you. And the youngest curled up in my lap, whispering through her tears, I only want you. I hugged them all, my heart breaking and healing at the same time. Their voices had given me strength I didn't know I still had. For years, I had carried the burden of raising them alone, wondering if I was enough. But now I realized I hadn't just raised them. I had given them love strong enough to withstand even this storm. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Their truth had been spoken. Their voices could not be silenced. But as much as I wanted to believe it was over, deep down I knew the fight wasn't finished. My daughter wasn't going to give up easily, and the court had yet to make its final decision. The children's voices had filled me with hope, but hope alone was not enough to win a war. The courtroom battles dragged on, each hearing more exhausting than the last. Papers piled up on my small table at home, documents I didn't understand, words I couldn't pronounce, accusations I couldn't believe. Every day I felt weaker. My body was betraying me. Sleepless nights, constant stress, skipped meals, they were all taking their toll. My hands shook when I held my teacup. My chest tightened whenever the mailman came, terrified he carried another letter that would shatter us. The children tried to keep me strong. They did their chores without me asking, cooked simple meals when I was too tired, and even studied harder, as if proving to the world they were good kids would somehow convince the judge. But behind their brave faces I saw the fear. They heard the whispers at school. They saw the pity in neighbors' eyes. And worst of all, they felt the uncertainty that hovered over our home like a storm cloud. My daughter, meanwhile, seemed to grow stronger. Each court appearance, she arrived in fresh clothes, polished shoes, her lawyer whispering confidently by her side. She played her role perfectly, the grieving mother wronged by her own parent. People began to believe her. Some nodded sympathetically as she cried in the hallway. Others looked at me as if I were truly the villain she painted me to be. The weight of that judgment crushed me. Was I really doing the right thing? I asked myself this every night. Maybe I should give in. Maybe I should let her take them, just to spare the children more pain. But then I would look at their sleeping faces, the way they curled into me for comfort, and I knew giving up wasn't an option. Still, the pressure was unbearable. One night, after another long day in court, I collapsed on the kitchen floor. My chest burned, my head spun, and tears poured from my eyes uncontrollably. The children rushed to me, their voices panicked. "Grandma! Grandma, are you okay?" They tried to lift me, their small hands trembling. I forced myself to smile through the pain, whispering, "I'm fine, just tired." But inside, I wasn't fine. I was breaking. The hearings became more brutal. My daughter's lawyer produced witnesses. Neighbors who claimed I had spoken badly about her. Acquaintances who suggested I had wanted to keep the children all along. Lies, all of them. But lies, when spoken in a courtroom, can weigh heavily against the truth. Each accusation chipped away at me. Each insult made me question my worth. Was I really a mother figure? Or had I only been a placeholder until the real mother returned? The children begged to speak again, but the court insisted their first testimony was enough. I could see their frustration, their helplessness, their anger. They wanted to fight for me, but the system tied their hands. At home, I prayed constantly. My lips whispered desperate pleas into the night, my tears soaking the pillow. God, give me strength. Don't let them take my babies. Don't let this sacrifice be in vain. But as the days stretched into weeks, my faith wavered. I felt like Job in the scriptures, tested beyond measure. And there were moments, dark, painful moments, where I almost believed the lies. Maybe I was selfish. Maybe I had stolen them in some twisted way. After all, who was I to stand between children and their birth mother? One afternoon, as I sat in the courtroom waiting for yet another hearing to begin, I overheard whispers. My daughter wasn't fighting out of love. She was fighting out of desperation. Rumors spread that she had debts, that she needed money, that someone else, an old partner perhaps, was pushing her to reclaim the children for reasons that had nothing to do with motherhood. My blood ran cold. If it was true, then this wasn't about love at all. It was about gain. The children weren't her priority. They were her leverage. But how could I prove it? I was just one woman, weak and tired, with no resources. The weight of it all pushed me closer to the edge. One night, I sat alone in the dark, the children asleep in their rooms. I stared at the old photographs of them. First birthdays, first day of school, toothless smiles. Memories of laughter and love surrounded me, yet all I felt was despair. For the first time in my life, I whispered words I had never dared to say aloud. Maybe I can't win this. Tears streamed down my face as I covered my mouth to muffle my sobs. My body shook, my heart heavy with a pain I couldn't contain. I thought of the possibility, the unthinkable possibility, of waking up one day to an empty house. No laughter, no footsteps, no hugs, just silence. That night was my breaking point. I was no longer the strong grandmother who had carried the world on her shoulders. I was just a broken woman, terrified of losing the only reason she was still alive. But life has a strange way of testing us right before the truth is revealed. Because just when I thought all hope was lost, something unexpected changed everything. When you've carried the weight of fear long enough, even the smallest piece of truth feels like a miracle. And that miracle came when I least expected it. It was a gray morning, the kind where the clouds seemed to hang low, pressing down on everything beneath them. We were in court again, my daughter standing tall beside her lawyer, her act sharper than ever. She wept, she pleaded, she painted herself as the victim, every word dripping with falsehood. I sat silently, exhausted, my hands clenched in my lap. I was too weak to fight anymore, too broken to even raise my voice. But then, something happened. Her lawyer presented documents, supposed proof that she had always intended to return for her children. But as they laid those papers before the judge, a murmur rippled through the courtroom. One of the officials frowned, flipping through them with suspicion. The judge's eyes narrowed. "Where did these come from?" he asked. The lawyer hesitated. My daughter shifted uncomfortably. And then, like cracks spreading across glass, the lies began to break. It started with a witness, an old neighbor from the town my daughter had lived in years ago. He stepped forward, nervously clutching his hat. "Your Honor," he said, his voice trembling, "I don't mean disrespect, but—" She didn't just leave her kids with her mother. She disappeared. For years, rumors spread about her, drugs, bad company, debts. People said she was living with a man who hurt her, that she was too deep in trouble to care for her children. The courtroom gasped. My daughter's face went pale. She shouted, "Lies! All lies!" But her voice shook, and the cracks widened further. More witnesses came forward. A former friend spoke of how she had begged for money, always promising to get back on her feet, but never returning. A social worker revealed old records of complaints, neighbors who had reported neglect before she abandoned the children. Piece by piece, the image she had built crumbled into dust, and then the final blow came: financial records. Proof that she had recently taken large loans, that she was drowning in debt, that her sudden interest in reclaiming the children wasn't about love, it was about money. Some whispered she had been promised help if she regained custody. Others believed she wanted to use them for financial support or government aid. Whatever the reason, the truth was undeniable. She had not returned out of love, but out of desperation. The judge's expression hardened. He turned to her, his voice firm. "You accuse your mother of kidnapping, yet the evidence shows years of abandonment, neglect, and questionable choices. These children were not stolen from you. They were saved." For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. The confidence drained from her face. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. And then came the most powerful moment of all. The judge asked the children to speak once more, just briefly, now that more had been revealed. The eldest stepped forward. His voice was calm, steady, but full of emotion. "I think we all know the truth now. My mom left us. My grandma raised us. She is the reason we are alive, the reason we're okay. Please, don't take us away from her." The middle one, tears glistening in his eyes, added, "We're not evidence. We're not tools for money. We're people, and we belong with the person who actually loves us." And the youngest, holding her stuffed toy tightly, whispered the words that broke whatever remained of my daughter's defense. "I choose Grandma. Always." The silence that followed was deafening. Every word, every tear, every truth hung heavy in the air. In that moment, I felt years of pain release from my chest. The lies had been exposed. The masks had fallen. And though my daughter's betrayal still burned like fire in my heart, I knew the children's voices had carried the truth to light. The judge leaned forward, his decision clear. "These children are safe where they are. Custody remains with their grandmother. This case is dismissed." The gavel struck, and with that single sound, my nightmare ended. I sat frozen, tears streaming down my face, hardly believing it was real. The children rushed to me, their arms wrapping around me like anchors pulling me back to life. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. My daughter stormed out of the courtroom, her cries echoing down the hall. She was no longer the victim, no longer the actress. She was simply what she had always been, absent. And me? I wasn't a kidnapper. I wasn't a thief. I was simply what I had always been too, a mother in the only way that truly matters. The courtroom battle was over. The gavel had fallen. But even as the relief washed over me, I knew life would never return to what it once was. For months, I had lived in fear of losing the children, fear of being branded a criminal, fear of waking up to an empty house. Now that fear had lifted, replaced by a fragile sense of peace. But beneath it all was a scar, a wound carved by betrayal. My daughter's face haunted me. She had left my home in anger, her footsteps echoing down the courthouse hall, her eyes full of bitterness. She was my child, my blood, and yet she had stood against me, ready to tear apart everything I had built for those children. I couldn't hate her, though. A mother's heart doesn't work that way. Instead, I pitied her. I pitied the choices she made, the life she had thrown away, the bond she had destroyed. Maybe someday she would change. Maybe someday she would understand. But that day was not today. The children, however, gave me strength to keep going. That evening, when we walked back into our little home, they clung to me as if they were afraid I might disappear. "Grandma," the eldest said softly, "it's over now. You don't have to be scared anymore." The middle one chimed in, his fiery spirit unbroken. We told them the truth and they listened. "We're safe with you." And the youngest, her small hand in mine, whispered, "I only want you, forever." I hugged them all, my tears soaking their hair, my arms wrapped around them as tightly as I could. For 13 years, I had carried the weight of raising them alone. I had questioned myself 1,000 times. Was I enough? Did I do the right thing? But now, hearing their words, seeing their love, I finally believed it. I had been enough. The days that followed were quieter, softer. The neighbors who once whispered now looked at me differently. Some apologized, admitting they had judged too quickly. Others offered kind words, calling me strong, calling me brave. But I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a survivor. Life slowly returned to normal. Mornings were filled with the sound of the kettle whistling, children rushing off to school, laughter echoing through the house again. Nights brought the comfort of family dinners, homework scattered across the table, and quiet prayers of gratitude before bed. I tried to shield the children from the scars of what had happened, but I knew the experience had changed them. The eldest grew more protective, always watching over his younger siblings, always making sure I didn't carry too much. The middle one softened slightly, his anger turning into determination. He wanted to prove himself, to make me proud. And the youngest, though still tender, found a new kind of strength. She clung to me less out of fear now and more out of love. And me? I found myself learning to breathe again. I took joy in small things, hanging laundry in the sun, baking bread on Sundays, watching the children's faces light up when I told them stories of when they were small. For the first time in years, I felt like the storm had passed. But I also knew one truth that would never change. The wound my daughter left would always remain. She had accused me of kidnapping. She had dragged me through courts. She had tried to tear us apart. That betrayal could never be erased. Forgiveness perhaps might come with time, but forgetting? Never. And yet, despite it all, I found peace in a simple realization. Motherhood is not about blood. It is not about who gives birth. It is about who stays, who sacrifices, who loves without conditions. I didn't give birth to those children, but I raised them. I fed them, clothed them, comforted them, taught them, prayed for them. I was there when no one else was. That was motherhood. That was love. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of gold, the children and I sat together on the porch. The eldest leaned against me, quiet and thoughtful. The middle one laughed as he teased his sister, and the youngest curled up beside me, humming softly. I looked at them, my heart full, and I whispered, "No matter what happens in this life, remember this. You are loved. You are safe, and you are mine." They looked up at me, their eyes shining, and in that moment, I knew, whatever storms the future might bring, we would face them together. This was our new chapter. A chapter not defined by fear or betrayal, but by love, resilience, and the unbreakable bond we had forged. And though the world may never understand the depth of what we endured, I know this truth in my heart. Family is not about who leaves. Family is about who stays, and I stayed, always.